think for the last 25 years of working, I've been in a very privileged position to work for some great organisations, such as Shell and KPMG and MTV. And I've often had the pleasure of listening to people from the EIU and the FT. And I'm always feeling very humbled about the fact that they have access to huge amounts of data and information and predict the future of the economy. But I'm always left feeling very helpless in terms of what I can do as an individual in the organisations that I work for and with the teams that I work within. And so often, in terms of my sort of look to the future, I think about the changes in human behaviour that organisations need to either encourage or facilitate in order for them to make the most out of the current environment and the future environment. And I came up over the last sort of month or so with three sort of notions, and whether they're trends or whether they're strategies or whether they're themes, I'll leave you to decide. But one was around sort of information philanthropy, which is a growing movement around opening up the information and data sets that we own and produce. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. The other is information obesity or information gluttony. And this was, I guess, born out of some thoughts I had about 10 years ago about, what's my role in an organisation? And it was largely around seeing myself as an information gourmet. How do we take the vast quantities of information that we've got and make them suitable, palatable, digestible for different audiences, both internally and externally? But I think with the rise of big data over the last 2 or 3 years, I've seen organisations crumbling under the weight of information, which is no different to sort of try and consume everything at the buffet table at a wedding. And then finally, some thoughts around information anarchy. And I think Leveson has quite beautifully sort of demonstrated what happens when misinformation and misappropriation of information results in breakdown of society, organisations and lives. And there's some thoughts, I think, about how we can bring information democracy back into organisations and probably head off some damaging corporate reputation. But let me turn back to information philanthropy. Partnering up with third sector organisations is going to be a real competitive sort of edge, I guess, over the next sort of 2 or 3 years. And that's not just about sort of PR and warm, fuzzy feelings about CSR. It's about looking at the data and the information that we produce and that we buy and that we share, and then turning that over to organisations that, yes, they'll take your money, but what they really want is your data as well. And I think what we can all do is look at the data that we produce and think, where else could this be used? We're very, very concerned about information security and sort of information espionage, organisations taking our data and misusing it or using it for competitive edge. But there are organisations which are struggling because they haven't got the money to pay for the sort of information that we have access to, and also the information that we create as organisations comprising tens of thousands of individuals. Corporations and governments can donate data to be used to help track diseases, avert economic crises, relieve traffic congestion and age development. And again, you don't know how valuable the information that you have is until you talk to third-party organisations or third sector organisations. So I think this growth in information philanthropy is going to be something to sort of give competitive edge to organisations. There's an organisation called Global Viral, founded by a chap called Dr. Nathan Wolfe. And they rely on mining the open web for signs of outbreaks of viruses. And they argue that none of the risks of open data are insurmountable, and the significant potential public benefit outweighs the costs of resolving them. So I would urge you to think in your organisations, in the capacities that you have, to think whether or not the information that you consume, produce, might be of use to the developing world or to charitable organisations. Information obesity. Effectively, overconsumption of data and information leads organisations to be clueless and leaves individuals feeling frustrated and fairly sluggish. So it's much better to be more discerning, because just because it's on the buffet table, as I've said, doesn't mean you need to pile it high and gorge yourself. But as long as you open up your data sets, whether they be public sector data sets, private sector data sets, and provide some guidance and maybe some pointers to where individuals may sort of use that data, I think, again, that's a way of overcoming this sort of glut of information, which is growing at a rate of exabytes and petabytes and zettabytes per year, in numbers which we just cannot fathom as human beings. And then finally, again, about information anarchy. We've seen that real-time misinformation can bring down individuals, organizations, and governments. But again, by opening up data feeds and providing information to help people navigate, there are possible insights and knowledge for everybody. And again, you see sort of misinformation passes around on Twitter fairly quickly. People often die and then resurrect themselves in the flick of a hashtag. But again, for your organizations, information anarchy is a risk both from your employees but also from your competitors. And I think we need strategies in order to help people navigate information more effectively. So what do we have today? I think we have fairly closed and boring corporate information environments for our end users. We often create bespoke data structures which are illogical. We have acronyms created by marketing. We create our own language. We turn perfectly normal data sets into overly complex spreadsheets, which leads to a lot of information anxiety, a phrase sort of surfaced by Richard Saul Wurman, who's one of the sort of godfathers of information architecture. Corporate jargon sort of kills conversation and attention spans. Desktops are locked down and uninspiring. They don't support initiative. And MS Office assumes that everybody wants to go into print, but we're human beings. We like to converse. We like to have a dialogue. We know more than we say, and we say more than we can write down. That's a phrase which David Snowden sort of came up with about 10 years ago. And email systems are a hangover from the memo culture. What we're looking for is some sort of dialogue. And so what I think is going to happen in the future, I think we're going to see more crowdsourced information systems. We'll see more self-organizing teams, cloud-top environments as opposed to desktop environments, open source applications and just-in-time mashups, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Google-like ecosystems featuring real-time status updates and threaded responses. We'll no longer be chained to the desk or chained to awful meeting rooms. Telepresence, Skype, video capture, speech recognition, everything that enables us to be human beings and not human doings. And I think some very exciting technology developments and also some very exciting developments in the sort of the information industry which will support that. So let's look at some factors that maybe support this. DIY information amateurs and professionals are actually utilizing crowdsourcing sites today to download big data sources, provide their own interpretations, and accessing complex analytics software available freely online. How many of us in organizations feel constrained by the tools that are given to us by the corporate IT department? The digital savvy, capable end users demanding better customer service and better information. And quite regularly, individuals will trade information online. Mobile phone operators, tariffs will be shared very, very easily. TripAdvisor, brings organizations to the top or the bottom of their rankings. And again, Twitter is used to relay, good or bad customer service. The millennials and how they're turning the workplace on its head, they use multiple devices simultaneously. They're unafraid to experiment, and they're unfazed by IT security policies. But bring your own device as a starting point for them. And I think very few organizations have embraced the need to provide very flexible information and technology environments for millennials. Ignore them at your peril, either as employees or as customers or competitors. Again, I talked about sort of the risk of information anarchy possibly being mitigated by opening up your information because they'll open up their own and make decisions in real time. A recent study by IBM, the CEO study 2012, says that tighter control is giving way to more openness. So anticipating demands for even more transparency and competitive need for greater internal and external collaboration. And 63% of CEOs are focused on collaborative environments. How many of us have got collaborative working environments within our own organizations? I remember 10 years ago at KPMG writing a paper on the online collaborative environment. We didn't do much with it. I moved to BDO in about 2007 and talked about that, and we struggled with it. But here we are, 63% of CEOs now focused on collaborative working environments. People are using Skype and IM and discussion boards and chat rooms, having open information ecosystems. That's going to have a real consequence for the information industry, and that the information that we're sucking down from large organizations like Thomson, Factiva, the FT, we're using that information and we're sharing it with our neighbours, and we want to have a natural conversation, a progression of a conversation and an idea with a customer or with an employer or a competitor. But we're hamstrung by copyright, and we're hamstrung by restrictions on what we can do with that information. We need to think much more about having people, personal information profiles. So when I move from organisation to organisation, I take the ownership and the rights and the access to information sets that I've had in previous organisations. And organisations that sell information need to be much more flexible about providing that capability to individuals, so that we don't move from one organisation to the next and spend the next 6 months becoming hamstrung because we've got new information systems to get access to, and we aren't able to use the information that we had in our previous organisations. And real-time competition is going to be a factor. Turning your organisation around on a penny and adapting in real time to competitor action. As I mentioned before, mobile phone tariffs openly are compared on social media channels, customers moving from O2 to Virgin to Orange in the blink of an eye. And I can see a growth of crowdsourcing of potential agencies and business partners using immediate recommendations from online communities. We've seen the growth of auctions, silent auctions, closed auctions, and sort of bids and tender sites for organisations. But picking your agencies and picking your information vendor may well happen in a chat room based on advice and guidance and recommendations from other individuals that you work with. So Stephen mentioned that I'd sort of referred to an Accenture report, and there's a fantastic report they produced called Information 2015, Reforming the Paradigm. And there's some amazing future scenarios and capabilities within that. And some of that I've seen already, and some of that reminds me of a report that PwC did back in about 2007, which was the Future of Work 2020. And they talked about the green world, the orange world, and the blue world. The blue world being the corporate, the orange being the very heavily connected ecosystems of self-employed individuals and small agencies, and the green world being very sustainable businesses. But there's a notion of augmented social workspaces. And I just want to read this passage which beautifully sums it up. The augmented social workspace is a device-independent, enabling a seamless and friction-free social user experience, high-definition video conferencing, 3D sound, mixed reality, Pico beamers, that's small little projectors, and simultaneous document editing features to facilitate interactions. I remember talking at a TFPL Connect meeting, again probably about 4 or 5 years ago, and showed a video that Microsoft had produced about the future of work, and it was all about surface technology, and it was a little bit like Minority Report. But you've seen with the advent of Windows 8 and Windows Surface, and the availability of these telepresence solutions, that we're actually living in a sort of a matrix world at the moment. This technology is available, and it's how you're going to use that technology in organizations to equip your individuals to make lightning fast decisions. I think we're going to see the emergence of experts as a service, and by that I mean virtual armies of experts available 24/7, the ability to bid for translation resource, the ability to bid for project management resource, skills and insight and strategists and marketeers online in a real sort of eBay bidding environment. We're not going to see people wanting to engage people for 6 months to a year. We're going to want people just in time, a very sort of Japanese approach to delivery of expertise and capability. And again, IBM in its CEO study for 2012 says that 71% of CEOs see human capital and customer relationships as key sources of sustained economic value. So we're going to see a rapid rise in the need for organizations to leverage human capital. And how many times have we heard people say, people are our most important asset, but actually do nothing about that? In terms of information systems and analytics and being able to make sense of the vast amounts of data that we have, we'll see a rise of real-time reality mining. If you think about classic marketing, which sort of uses ABC classification to bunch consumers into broad categories, we've seen a growth in sort of tracking behavior of target audiences, which leads to more sort of optimized experiences online, so whether that's email, whether that's newsletters and publications. But I think we're going to see a real-time tracking of online user behavior and online actions combined with sentiment analysis using tools like Social Radar, Meltwater Buzz, which are able to, in real time, track the influence of an organization and and the sentiment of individuals and communities. And we'll see laser-focused service delivery, both in the B2B and the B2C environments. And on a personal note, we'll see personal decision engines. You know, whether you're a sales individual, or whether you're running a territory trying to put products into new markets. You know, information management dashboards with context-setting information enabling decision makers to make groundbreaking decisions at lightning speed are going to be the norm. Again, it's going to require investment in IT, but the information is already there. We just need to make sense of it. So I guess whether they are trends, whether they're themes, or whether they're strategies, I think the three things to consider, you know, for 2013 are going to be giving away data and information. Sharing is caring. Information obesity. You know, watch what you consume. Overconsumption makes you sluggish and clueless. Be smarter about what you consume. And head off disaster by opening up and engaging honestly with stakeholders and enemies. Take your data, and before it's made into misinformation, ensure that that information is communicated clearly, succinctly, and on time. So effectively the good, the bad, and the ugly. Thank you very much.